Hello and welcome to the 60th episode of the RevOps Show. Can you believe it? I'm a little speechless, if I'm being honest. Wow, we made it to 60, guys. I feel like every time we reach another 10 episodes, I just get more and more excited the closer we get to episode 100. But today is not about the fact that it is the 60th episode. Today, Doug and Jess are talking about data architecture and data structure and how this is a new game, and they just get into how you should be structuring your data and why that's important and how everything kind of forms once you have this piece together. So today you get to hear a little bit behind the curtain to how we at Lyft think about this, and look out for a future episode where we get into the actual technical standpoint. So with that in mind, let's get ready to RevOps and get into the show.
Jess.
Oh, wow. I don't even know what to do with that. Doug.
Yes, the curveball worked. And by the way, for those of you that don't watch on video, I realize that on one hand, it's just, headshots on video, but Jess's facial expressions at all times are a show amongst themselves. So
people are missing out if they're not watching on video. I mean, I don't know what to say.
The only thing that prevents you from putting Jim Carrey to shame for facial expressions and contortions is that he does them on purpose and yours are just natural.
It's a talent. What can I say?
But for those of you not watching on video, as the intro music was playing, I took a deep breath so that Jess would be ready for, and then it
didn't happen.
And then it worked. It worked.
It did.
My day is done.
Yep, you can take the rest of the day off, Doug. With that one, you might be able to take the rest of the week off, in fact.
You've gotten frustrated at me a couple times in the last 6 or so weeks, and I just want to remind you that on, I think it was like March 28th, I suggested that I take this quarter off.
You did. And I chose
said no.
Yeah, I chose not to take you up on that offer. It's true. So it's my fault, is what you're saying. The fact that you frustrate me is my fault.
I'm failing to see where was there confusion? Could there be any other way?
No other possibilities. Okay, yeah, that's fair.
I will tell you, Jess, it is I don't know even how to describe the experience with the world and all the concerns and everything going on, and then what's the momentum that we're dealing with, but then also like there's just how can it be so energy creating and depriving at the same time?
You've described it well. It's like,
there's an old phrase, I know Bart Simpson used to say the term a lot. I don't remember if he gave the whole term, which is you violate the laws of, until I met you, or something. You violate the laws of physics. You both suck and blow at the same time. Yeah, it is very interesting. And remember, as we it was, momentum's a really interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's really powerful. But it's so easy to lose control.
Yep.
Like it's like a spinning top. It's a whirling dervish, if you will.
I've never heard that term before. That's a new one for me.
You never heard whirling dervish? That's
no.
Well, luckily I said spinning top first, so you had.
You did. So I know what that is. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was it? Probably about a year or so ago, maybe even a little bit more than that, as things started getting really translated. Our team really started growing, and we talked about the traditional framework of forming, storming, norming, performing.
Yep.
And we would always get the question, so are we in the storming phase, or have we gotten through the storming phase? And it's like,
Not
we
yet.
haven't entered it. We haven't entered the storming phase. So I think it's safe to say that we've entered the storming phase.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Though I think that people on the show don't get to hear, like, we don't really talk about, I mean, we mention comments about what's going on at Lyft from time to time, but it's so much fun when late in the day and we're just shooting the shit and we're talking about history, et cetera. Remember when that client, ended the program and you thought you needed to go check the help wanted ads? Although remember, you've never been there. You maybe didn't realize it, but you weren't going anywhere. If in January 2020,
Mm-hmm.
I told you that things were going to unfold as they've unfolded for the last 3.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Would you have expected that the delivery of what we're doing is as strong as it is?
Probably not. No.
How many hours a week would you have thought you'd be working, taking care of crises and emergencies?
Oh my God. I mean, because that was way worse then. Like, so.
And remember one of the things I told you back then was part of the problem is that we're building a machine designed for greater velocity, so that as we pick up that speed,
Yep.
Those things won't magnify; those things will actually reduce.
Yep. I remember. I didn't believe you, but I remember.
And look, there's plenty for us to improve. There's more driving me crazy than, but it's actually funny because I think that we don't really deal with crises. We don't really have a lot of crises.
No.
I'm not saying we've never had a crisis, but we've certainly never had an organizational, all hands, 17 people working through. Actually, we haven't had 17 people working through, because for most of the time we haven't had 17 people.
Yeah, I was going to say not 17 people. When we were smaller, we had more of that, but I think it was more of a stretch from a resource standpoint than anything else.
The closest thing that I remember in the last couple of years was just as an integration was going to go live, the client expressed the realization of something that they hadn't communicated, and it wouldn't work, and we had to get it. And so we've stretched some dev things sometimes there, but and again, even there, like it was intense, but it wasn't a crisis. And so the funny thing about that is, when you haven't experienced a crisis, non-crisis become crises, right? And so again, that's a fascinating.
Well, and I worked for an animation firm for a while, so I'm familiar with crunch and all of that, and
you have a bachelor's of animation, don't you?
I do.
Oh, I just made that up. I didn't know that I was right.
I have a bachelor's fine arts with a focus in animation. So there you go.
So my daughter graduated college, and one of the things that when I went to school, and I guess small schools do this more frequently, that you can kind of craft your own major. When I went to Shepherd, they called it interdisciplinary studies. So I was originally going to kind of build a sports journalism major.
Oh, okay.
Then I saw what sports journalists got paid and the hours they had to work, and I said, sales sounds pretty good right now.
Same.
So Dylan, my daughter, graduated with a Bachelor of Science, so she double majored. I mean, half the school. These kids. Very impressive. I don't understand them, but so she has a Bachelor of Science and a Bachelor of Arts. So she got.
Oh, really? Okay, I didn't realize that. Okay.
But so this was the first year that the school graduated somebody with a Bachelor of Fine Arts. I didn't know that was a thing. And the funny thing is, obviously I'd seen your resume, et cetera, or your LinkedIn profile. I never noticed BFA. And the funniest thing is, so like they have, as they're conferring the whatever, all people with, Bachelor stand up, all Bachelor of Arts stand up, all BFA, Bachelor of Fine Arts. One person stood up, and it was somebody who had crafted their own major. So it was their first Bachelor of Fine Arts, one person. That was pretty funny. So sorry,
That's
you were
pretty
saying
cool.
animation. You were saying animation.
No, so I was saying, because I worked at the animation firm, I know what crunch time is. I know what crunch time feels like, and so like being up against that wire, like we are not in that level of intensity, which I kind of like. Certainly, we've had periods like that with the dev team, but not to the extent of what I've experienced there.
And you know, it is interesting because I used to always ask, how can we avoid crunch time? What do I have to do to prevent crunch time?
Yeah.
And I finally realized, and that's when I think all kinds of things started improving, that you don't avoid crunch time. There's always crunch time. Like that's why deadlines matter. You didn't know what I was going to talk about opening up the conversation today.
I did not.
I'm not saying that I knew what I was going to talk about opening up the conversation today, but and I think you're gonna be impressed by this because I'm going to connect the opening to our topic today.
Okay.
Which is something we rarely do.
Yep.
Right. We typically open, talk about something completely unrelated to anything that any reasonable person listening would care about. But you know what? That's what makes us the top RevOps show on Spotify.
Exactly.
So what is our topic today, Jess?
We're going to talk about data structure and architecture and the right approach to defining it.
And you know why I think we've had the experience that we've had? The earlier conversation, why we've been able to?
Because of our structure.
Well, we've always focused on structure and system, but actually the way we thought about data, what we're going to talk about today, is we've always had a focus on data structure, data architecture. And I say this because it's easy for people to forget. Everything is data. I mean, I love talking to people. You know, I've talked to people in companies. You know, we're data driven. We're data obsessed. And then I'm like, well, why did you do that move? Well, because we have this quantitative metric. I'm like, yeah, but you can't measure. Well, I'm sorry, Doug, but we're data driven. What would you have us do? It's like, well, qualitative, that's data too, right?
Yep.
And so, you know, the attention that we pay, and I mean, you know, candidly, the obsessive attention that we pay to it. So I'm gonna kind of I'm gonna lay down something, and then you start digging in, and that is, you know, an underpinning of the RevOps show, I think, is CRM implementation. We don't talk about CRM implementation all the time,
right?
But in a modern organization of any reasonable size with any attempt for growth, your CRM is your central nervous system.
Yep.
By the way, I want to say something very clear to anybody that is listening. Anyone who says we don't have a CRM, I hate to tell you this, you are wrong. Everybody has a CRM. I mean, the closest to not having a CRM is you have absolutely positively nothing about customers in writing. I would make the argument in that case, your mind is your CRM. But, you know, I've had people say, no, we don't have a CRM. We use spreadsheets. Okay, cool. So Excel is your CRM.
Yep.
Oh, no. Everyone has their own spreadsheet. Okay. So you have 17 CRM, but you still have CRM. So CRM is your central nervous system. It translates thoughts into actions, feeds back actions back to thoughts. It's responsible for mind-body connection, et cetera. And so data architecture and data structure is the game. That is the game. And when you're seeing friction, especially when you're seeing friction where every action you take to address it doesn't seem to improve anything, and any improvement may just be like, okay, well, I put my finger over that hole, so it stopped bleeding out of that hole, but it just created another hole that it's bleeding from, right? Like you have to go back to, let's look at our data architecture and our data structure. And I'm even as we are working with companies that have more advanced, more sophisticated systems in place, more sophisticated people in place, I am surprised how counterintuitive, how foreign that idea is. That there's this thought of, okay, we've got it set up and now we're done. So data architecture, data structure, that is the game.
So
if you say anything about CRM being a game changer, then it has to change your data. Like it has to like put you in a different universe. Like we're now dealing with quantum data or something. I don't know.
Yeah. So I think I want to start with, you know, Can you describe kind of our approach, our take on how we look at data architecture and like maybe how that's unique?
Give me the question behind the question, because I'm worried in answering that I'm going to skip so many steps that I'm going to just.
Yeah, so it's kind of like where do we start? So if we have so you talked about, we talk around implementation a lot. That's usually what we're doing. So if we have an implementation, a CRM
Okay.
implementation, like how do we start to unpack define data architecture?
So one of my recent mantras, you notice I don't talk about the plot as much anymore. I don't mention plot as much anymore. My recent mantra when we talk about CRM is it's not about the CRM. And of course it's all about the CRM, but
Right.
in being all about the CRM, it's not at all about the CRM. So the first thing is our approach. Data architecture and structure is the game. It's not about data.
Because it's about the structure and architecture.
No.
Okay.
It's about the motion. It's about the motion. Jess, at Lyft, we live by Prime Directive. I don't know if you're familiar with this or not. But the business process must drive the business motion. I think I would use business motion, except it's not specific enough, because process, people get lost too much in process and they think,
Yeah.
oh, well, I have a Lucid chart that says lead starts here and then moves to here. And see, that's my, I've mapped my process. No, you have, that's not, that is sub process. That is linear process. What we're talking about is the motion. The first mistake that happens, and let's just reference this in this database. A CRM is a database. What we're talking about here, gets operationalized in a database. The database exists to serve the organization, to serve the job.
Mm-hmm.
The job doesn't exist to serve the data or the database. And so the first thing that we're doing is we're understanding what is the job, what are the
Mm-hmm.
motions, and who are the players. So there's an old book about, there's a psychology element and behavioral piece, and it the way I remember it, I know this is not right, but the way I remember it is, what hat are you wearing? Right. And I remember I took actually, this might've been where I learned. I took a course from Franklin Covey, because I got, back in the day when, we used to carry around those 1.5 inch binders. That was our calendar. It was so that you could only carry a month or two with you at a time. And they talked about roles, and they said, a role is like a hat. And so you're a father, you're a mother, you're a CEO, you're a salesperson, you're a sailor, you're a this, you're a that. And sometimes you're wearing multiple hats, but typically you're changing your hats, and your hats aren't linear. Right?
Yep.
And like this is why, for a while people were really surprised, because Facebook was a really effective paid channel for B2B.
Yep.
Right. And the reason was Facebook worked because the ad came actually out of expectation. So that's why it was able to stand out, until everyone said, oh, wow, Facebook is really good for this. And they all ran to, and it became a waste. But the way that you crafted your ad needed to be different, because I might be on Facebook at 2 p.m. By the way, I'm not on Facebook in probably 3 years now.
Yeah.
I might be on Facebook at 2 p.m. So I'm in my business hours. I'm at my office.
Right.
But I'm not wearing my work hat when I'm on Facebook.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so my hat shifts. So I'm still the same person,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm a different entity. It's a different mindset. It's a different framework. And so when we talk about who are the players, that's what I'm talking about. With it, there's a tendency that we think of, okay, this is a contact. A contact is a person. The person is always the same. So the data structure is, we have a type called contacts. It might be a table. It might be an object. It might be just a field or a property.
Right.
It's a segmentation. But so they're a person all the time. So anything that's person, that's the entity. But I'm a partner sometimes.
Yep.
And I'm a customer sometimes. And I could be the same person. I could be a partner with you, and I could be a customer with you.
Yep.
I kind of laugh because one of the most common questions we get when we share modern CRM with companies that aren't really used to it is they go, we talk about life cycles and they go, okay, so well, they're a customer, but then what do we do to the life cycle if there's another opportunity for us
Right.
to sell? And so in that case, what you have is, I could be a non-customer opportunity, non-customer new opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I could be a customer new opportunity.
Yeah.
Like, so the way I look at it when you're going to market is, are you looking, new customer, new business,
Yep.
existing customer, new business,
Mm-hmm.
existing customer, existing business,
Yeah.
right? Those are all, those are three different players.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, this doesn't mean that I need to have a table for, each one of those three, but it means that's when you're talking about motions and you're talking about players, it's you need to understand and identify at any given time, here are the players. Are you familiar with IMDb's X-ray? You get it on Prime Video.
No. No.
So, Amazon bought Internet Movie Database.
Yeah.
And they built it into their Prime Video. So with most of the shows or movies that they're showing, I can click the information button, and what will come up is which actors are in the scene right now. Not like here's the 7 stars, but right now Stanley Tucci and Angela Dickinson. God, I'm going like really old school. And by the way, if there's music playing, what the song is, and it's what's in there right now. And 30 seconds later, a new person comes on screen, that person shows up. All right. And then that person, and so like, that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the players as you're going through the motions is who's in there, who's not. It really is like you're drawing up a play.
Right.
And, in football, and, sometimes this wide receiver is just running a dummy route. They're not in consideration. These are the 7 active players. These are the 3 active players on this play. This is what's happening. In basketball, it's the rotation. And by the way, I might go from being this player, this position, if you will. Like my position might be, let me call it role. I'm this player. I'm this position, which is wide receiver. But I'm in this role, which could be blocker or could be, sometimes the way they run these routes is the person is responsible for getting to a point because it's the differential from where that person is that determines where the active play, the intended recipient, like all these things are going on that enable highly orchestrated, highly complex movements to be adjusted and to work in real time.
Yep.
So like that's a lot of what we're talking. So before we're even thinking about the database, before we're thinking about what's our entity relationship diagram, and I laugh and I like to make fun of ERDs because it's like the first question we ask is, we talk to somebody in IT or we talk to somebody data oriented. It's like, well, where's the ERD? We talk about integration. Well, show me your ERD, and it's like, well, wait a second. Tell me what motion, what job is this integration supporting?
Yeah.
And then the answer is, well, it varies.
Yeah.
And then it's like the intent, like the expected response to it varies is, okay, well then let's skip that question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
My favorite question is like, how is this used? And I get, well, that depends.
Yeah. And, we were looking at an integration that had been spec'd with a lot of complexity. I think it was like 7 to 10 points of integration in 4 to 5 table objects. And once we got into what the motion was, right? Because the first answer was it depends.
Right.
And this could be happening, that could be happening, this could be happening, that could be happening. But when we actually got into what is the motion that this is supporting, what we found was it never varies. It was a very straightforward, and it became, so it went from a let's just say 9 point with 4 of, 8 of the points being bidirectional, 1 of them being unidirectional to a single unit, to a 1 point solution. Simplified the whole thing, took away errors, allowed system X to do what system X does, system Y to do what system Y does, and all of the noise of system X and system Y, which matters to the people who rely on those systems,
Mm-hmm.
it prevented all of those things from happening. So before we even start, before we even say contacts, companies,
Right.
deals, we go, what's a deal?
Right.
And so that's where it starts.
Yeah, and I would
that's
even
the beginning of the difference.
yeah, and I would even say we go so far as to so specifically HubSpot. When we implement HubSpot, you're always going to have contacts, companies, and deals in there. We may not always be using them, but we define what those mean in that specific instance. Like deals may not always be sales opportunities, like in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
And so I would say too is like defining those items, even your quote unquote standard objects is important.
So my favorite little custom trick that we do here is that sometimes when we're dealing with a company for how they do with deals, their deals are part of a very broad quote. And so there's components within the deal that make up the deal. And it's not an all or none proposition. It's not even necessarily all at the same time.
Right.
And so sometimes the deal is the parent of the subsets.
Right.
And sometimes it's the child. It's
Yep.
the subset of the parent. We almost always go to a account or locations type relationship. Sometimes the company is the parent. Sometimes it's the child of the custom object, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And here's where it comes to play. And this isn't going to sound as relevant, A, as it is, and B, I mean, so it's not unusual for real estate companies now to be using more typical CRM, though it's still true that the vast majority of real estate companies are very frustrated with their CRM. And the reason for it is, if you're in a real estate business, if you're in a real estate vertical, with some exceptions, you are an asset-centric business. Your business model is asset-centric. And so you don't think about people, you think about property. You think about locations, you think about assets. And by the way, one of the other things about real estate that's interesting is A, the demand tends to be structural, but B, the demand is finite. What I mean by that is, if I'm selling a license on software, I have infinite supply.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, technically I could come up against bandwidth, but that's just a few bucks to AWS. In manufacturing, there's inventory, but like, the new iPhone's coming out. There was a supply chain interruption. There's a shortage of inventory. Okay, but what's happening behind that is they're ramping up production. And by the way, when Apple does it, it's 9 times out of 10, it's by design, so that they're building actual scarcity in. You can't just ramp up properties, right?
Right.
So there is a very limited place. And by the way, I go and look at, I'm a home builder. I've got this lot. It's a corner lot with the woods in the back. Once someone buys that lot, theoretically, that floor plan might still exist, but that lot doesn't exist anymore, right? And so that lot is what drives the revenue. But I could have 17 people considering that lot.
Yep.
I could have legitimately 17 deals.
Mm-hmm.
So I look in my CRM and I go, oh my God, we got 7. Let me look at it.
Right.
I can sell one.
Right.
Here's another thing. I've got the Cardenas family, and they're looking at property A and property B. They're 2 deals.
Right.
It is highly unlikely. And by the way, if you do buy both, please let me know, because that means clearly comp has gotten out of hand. Right? So that's asset centric. Now the difficulty is that, what has happened with that is that everything got built for real estate based on the asset.
Yep.
So I only saw demand assets. So 17 people were interested in. I couldn't see what the relationship was. And by the way, it was such a bad customer experience, because I would go to, the same builder to their other property or a property manager, and it was like I didn't exist.
Yep.
right? And so what we did in mapping that out is we realized, well, what's right is a contact. So real estate is an asset centric approach. CRM, traditional CRM, modern CRM, any general CRM is contact or company based.
Right. Yep.
Right? Well, which is the right one? Which is the right centric? They both are.
Yeah.
And so, it's funny because when we look back, I would like to say we did this by design. We made this realization and we plotted out and innovated. We actually just kind of dealt with frustration after frustration.
Right.
And realized, wait a second. And then all of a sudden, like it hit and we started getting response of, oh, wow, we can do this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Was we realized, wait, what we did here was we just built the asset centricity into it. And the reason we were able to do that is because we didn't pay attention to the quote unquote objects. And we did that initially before custom objects existed.
I
So
remember.
this wasn't just right.
Actually, I would make the argument it was more important we did that before we had custom objects because we really had to problem solve how are we going to address all of these issues.
Correct. Now here's another example, and it's someone that situations we've dealt with before, but there's kind of a percolating one right now that this like really staffing. By the way, a client that we have, right? So you've got marketplace. You got marketplace businesses. What's a marketplace business? It means you're working the demand side and the supply side. So, our client is an auction site. So they're building, they need to build sellers and they need to build buyers. And by the way, if you look at the underlying value in a marketplace business, which is kind of like a network business.
Yep.
The more buyers you have, the more valuable you are to sellers. The more sellers you have, the more valuable you are to buyers. So whatever your product, like eBay used to be the killer app. eBay is not a killer app anymore because all of a sudden they don't have the sellers and the buyers. It's not clear. There's all kind, right? They didn't maintain it. The product is higher quality. I'm sure it is.
Sure.
Right. But it's less valuable.
Right.
Right. And so staffing's a messy business because I could be a hirer. I could be a job. I could be a candidate. I could be a decision maker. I could be, and by the way, I could be one person serving all of those things.
You're giving me flashbacks to when we managed a staffing company 5-6 years ago.
I can, and by the way, I've got to, as a sales rep, and this is my favorite staffing tactic of all time. We combine the desk. Combined desk means I'm getting jobs and I'm getting recruits, candidates.
Yep.
Then that's not working, so we split the desk. And now we're specialized candidate.
Right. And
specialized job. And then we want to match. And like all of these things are going on. And there's awareness advertising that we're doing that needs to be tracked. There's job-based advertising that needs to be tracked. There's pipeline elements that need to be tracked. There's like all of these things are going on. And the difficulty is no one says who are the players, what's the job. And so we build these rigid pieces. A company we're working with right now that is private equity backed, building by acquisition is a big element. There's cross-sell opportunities. But so here we have multiple companies that have existed as separate entities. But now they're supposed to talk and they think about this. Like all of these things are going on, right? And oh, by the way, we buy this company, which brings a new line of service that we're not known for, and it trades under this brand name. So I'm working with brand name X.
Yep.
And by the way, none of these brands are brand names. They're all medium-sized, B2B, very niche-focused businesses. So I'm working with company X. This new line of service is being brought to me by company Y. I'm using somebody completely disconnected or not using anything for that. The line solves a different problem, something that we haven't talked about before. The people in my company that are responsible for that are different, right? And so I am an existing customer, but I'm also not an existing customer. So by the way, now we have, now it's not actually as simple as new customer, new business, existing customer, new business. It's kind of existing customer, new business with new customer, new business in terms of the motion that you're looking at. How do you manage that? And oh, by the way, there might also be not just an influencer, but a defined influencer. So there is a consultant or an advisor or a channel. And oh, by the way, that channel might also be a this and it might also be a that. And everyone's going to they're either, firing up new tables to account for like every, little thing, right?
Right.
Still my favorite is the phone number object.
Oh my God.
Right.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, so like, here's a classic mistake. Point of contact. Remember the point of contact object?
I do.
So the underlying idea of the point of contact object isn't as bad as it looks. Right. Now, they didn't use it this way, but
right.
in this interaction, I'm wearing this hat. I'm the result owner, expert, whatever for my company on this. On this, I'm the user. On something else, while I wore, the quote unquote decision maker hat over here, I'm now a user. And then on this other thing over there, I'm a champion. And on an implementation over there, I'm an interested bystander, or I'm an impacted. So like all of these things are going on. And so like I am the primary contact when it comes to this, but I'm irrelevant when it comes to that. Right.
Right.
And so we can't so the reason they did the different object was because of the idea of what that was, right? That I could be different things in different places.
Right.
But the reason it didn't work was because it's not actually an object. It requires a different function. It requires a floating, flexible function because I'm playing different roles in different situations, and we need to be able to account for it. Right. And by the way, that is why we're driving so many people to be self-serve on complex things. Because look, you know what? I keep trying to explain to you I'm X, and you don't seem to be listening to me. And the reason you're not listening to me is because you have a box and you can't fit me into that box.
Yep.
Right. Because we started off thinking about, okay, what's the configuration? What's our entity relationship diagram, et cetera. So as we match those identities, where we start, if we showed people what we started with, they would probably fire us.
Probably.
Right. If we showed people where we started thinking before we even put the first idea on paper to show somebody, they would definitely fire us because we'd be like, there's 117 entities here.
Yep.
It comes down to 5 objects. Right. So what we're doing is we're pulling apart. We're stress testing it. Fewer is better. Simpler is more. All those things are true. But you've got to operate at the extremes to work on coming into the middle. And if you don't understand the motion, and by the way, I mean understanding it from the standpoint of you started there in your investigation process, because so many things get defined. This is my phrase of the day or the phrase of the week. If you spec out and ask me to build a concrete ship, my job's to build a concrete ship. My job's not to stress test the business requirements. Right. That's why really good technical people build crap. And that's why salespeople hate it. And that's why they don't jump onto it. And that's why adoption doesn't get there. And that's why we have this compliance problem. Because we can't tell a rep what they need to do. Because if a rep can make a sale some other way, they're going to make the sale that way.
Absolutely.
And sometimes they say like, well, we don't have the enforcement to do anything about it. And I mean, I'm a sales guy at the end of the day all the time. And I can't help but say, well, I sure hope you don't. Right? Because if we're in sales, the job is to make a sale. The question isn't how do we get you to comply? The question is, why isn't this structure creating value for you to making the sale easier? So we get out of this compliance mindset. So the reason we get into compliance mindset is because we haven't laid out this structure. We haven't looked at it from an entity and motion standpoint so that, and this is what I believe, because we talk about parent-child. And sometimes the parent is the parent and the child is the child, but sometimes the child is the parent, especially when you're talking about, so I've got a parent, a child, a channel.
Yeah.
and a word of mouth and a marketing attribution in this. So maybe it started it at the child that led to this, that has this happening. And oh, by the way, there's a joint venture that's not really a parent or a child. And so sometimes I want to look at it through the entity of the corporation. Sometimes I want to look at it through the line of business. Sometimes I want to look at it through the picture of channel. And sometimes I need 5 different people that have 5 different structures all at the same time.
Yep.
And have you built that flexibility? And more often than not, you haven't. And if you haven't built that flexibility, by the way, flexibility that also brings constraint, right? So
Yep.
it's building structure, right? Because sometimes you'll go to flexibility where you might as well be using a spreadsheet.
Right.
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 Right. So it's balancing those 2 things out that get you to that data architecture and data structure. I think too often we think of data architecture and data structure as just, what's your ERD?
Yeah.
What's your data structure? What's your data architecture? And maybe your ERD gets the structure, but what's the architecture? Well, here's my ERD. Okay, no. That's a deliverable that comes from the architecture.
Right.
But what are we building?
Well, and I think so. What you said around if clients see what we started with, they likely would not be very happy. Really spurred a thought for me, and a step that I think a lot of people miss when we're talking about putting together an ERD, which is really talking through these things. So I think, there's a lot of thought that goes into, and we put it on paper, and all of the arrows point to other places. So, okay, that'll work because I can get everything to point to something, but we don't actually talk through, okay, how is this used? And where are people going to work from, and what are those actually having a conversation to poke holes into pieces and really say, okay, well, we have a site or location object. How's that going to be used? And do we actually need that? And why will the company object handle that?
And this will be fresh for you because we're implementing one of the larger, more complicated implementations. And I don't know how you feel right now. I feel like, we are as in control, like right now, if everything would be this good.
I mean, I'm also terrified because of that, but
well,
yes.
Sure. Well, I mean, that's the first indication that something really big is about to go wrong. But if you remember, our contact, who's both very happy right now, but he also shared he's very, very scared.
Oh, yeah.
And he's scared because we haven't talked to his IT and data team.
Right.
Now, here's what. If you do these things and you don't consider the stuff we talked about, what you just said, 100% on point. But if you're talking about the data structure, the relationship diagram, before you're talking about the motion, then you
I agree.
won't help. Like you've put glasses on. And so you're going to start seeing things through that. So while on one hand, yes, there's a company object in HubSpot. There's a company object. There's a contact object. There's a deal object. We know we're going to use an accounts object or something like that. We know if you're doing resale, we're going to do an account plan object. It's like we know those things are as close to givens as possible. And this is also why we separate function to a degree. We have a business process focused team. We have a CRM process focused team, but we start there. And so like I have to go in when I begin, like if I'm running this conversation, I go in on the assumption that we're not using any of those.
Right.
But of course I know we're using those. And that's why that's why we can do this in weeks and it doesn't take months or years. Right.
Yeah.
But I still have to have that, like what I'm looking for, even though I might know what a core element of the solution is what's different here so that we can make sure that we're accommodating this. Because by the way, what it associates with or doesn't associate with, what drives off of other things, those are all the elements that don't get represented in a diagram that are the difference between does your sales team, and remember the problem with database, the problem you go to digital is inherently zeros and ones.
Right.
Humans are whatever the opposite of that is. So data are zeros and ones. and humans are furniture. I don't know. They're fruit. They're whatever.
They're
It's
gray.
like how
They're
to
gray. They're
no,
gray.
no, because gray says between 0 and 1.
Okay.
What I'm saying
So
is
not even
they don't fit.
they live outside
And
of.
when
Okay.
and when you look at go to market, see, we're in
Mhm.
such this efficiency trap. We're efficiency obsessed. By the way, one of the reasons that we're efficiency obsessed is because we're lazy. It's why we're able to talk. It's why we're able to walk. You know, the reason that we're able to the reason that we have the brains that we have is because we learned how to walk on 2 feet. And
Right.
walking on 2 feet takes fewer calories than walking on 4. No, this is this is science, Jess. I know it's crazy coming from me, but it's science. That excess capacity of energy is what allowed our brain to develop, unique of any other animal. Right? Our core brain is the same as any reptile, right? So those are the things that our brain is. Daniel Kahneman's studies show this. We're inherently lazy. We want to find efficiency, so we keep shooting efficiency, right? And so efficiency says, put you in this box.
Right.
And value, so efficiency is eliminate variance. And by the way, zeros and ones have no variance. Between zeros and ones, yeah, there's variance, but the variance is only between 0 and 1.
Right.
There's still only so much
Right.
variance. And by the way, once you have data, like this is why these large language models, what's the word? Hallucinate. I like that. They're hallucinating.
I haven't heard that before.
So have you heard the story about the lawyer who used ChatGPT to write their brief? And so
Yes.
it cited cases. We had actually somebody that we're going to get to announce soon was doing something on GPT and asked for some quotes that came from certain texts, and it turned out it made up the quotes.
Right.
The reason for it is that first off, it's not thinking. Secondly,
Right.
everything exists between 0 and 1. And thirdly, what it's programmed to do, what the large language model is programmed to do, is to give you what you ask for. So I ask you to put this together citing cases. Well, it doesn't know real or different. It's literally just what large language model means is guess the next word.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
See. So what any data model will do? Do you know what data models do extraordinarily well? They predict the past.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because everything is based on the past. And maybe it's because I was in financial services for several years and I had to say infinite number of times, past performance does not indicate future results, which by the way
Right.
is not true.
Yeah.
Past performance does indicate future results, but humans are unique because we'll skip.
Right.
We'll, you know what? I'm sick of this and we'll just change. I'll go from being a smoker to like one day I'll stop smoking.
Yeah.
I'll be Ariana Huffington and I will be one of the most reactionary people. And then I'll get divorced and become one of the most progressive people. You forget he was married to Michael Huffington. He was crazy before crazy was a normal thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the world of politics. But anyways, right. So like that kind of flip is what happens. And when you're delivering go to market, we talk about differentiation. We talk about distinction, differentiate or die. Well, differentiation is variance.
Yeah.
And so if your architecture and model doesn't embrace variance, rapid evolution, rapid change, dynamic elements, then you're restricting everything and you're actually killing value, which is why the sales rep now doesn't adopt it. Because you're now making my job harder to do what I'm going to get hired or fired for, not easier.
I agree. That's probably like the biggest learning I've had from having worked here and worked with sales teams and worked on setting up databases is like you need to be able to embrace that variance within reason.
And so I loved Succession, and I loved the guesses as the guesses started coming from Succession. And I was listening to Kara Swisher's her
podcast.
kind of going blank. Yeah, her individual podcast, not Pivot. I'm going blank on. Not Sway. Sway was anyways, doesn't matter. And so she did a podcast, you know, after each episode, she had a podcast where they interviewed the guests. So again, so she was talking with writers and the producers and everything as things were going. And of course, that prediction that came out because of Tom Gabs or whatever the hell his name is, because he has the same last name as the third baseman for the whomever in 1920 who turned the only unassisted triple play. So I'm predicting he, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, did you see that? She was right. She was right. Oh my God, look at that." And Kara Swisher, I loved it on. She's like, "Yeah, no, she wasn't right. I mean, she gets the right outcome, but for the wrong reasons. It had nothing."
Right.
On and on and on. So like we can get, like, I might come into it. I'm going to go through this process that I just talked about. Even if I end up at the exact place where the initial guess was, that doesn't mean that the process didn't do anything. If I didn't go through that process, even though I have quote unquote the same setup, it's not going to have the same functionality. So this is my last thought. This is all about system design, right? And we have to remember with system design, we start off with empathy, a comprehensive, holistic understanding of the situation, the inputs, the stakeholders, the objectives. Then we go to hypothesis. And what we need to realize in system design with hypothesis is that is divergent.
Yep.
We have to break everything apart. That allows us to see different things. That's what allows us to stress test. That enables us to analyze. Then we synthesize, bring it together into its whole. That's how you manage complex systems, right? And when you skip the divergent part, so what happens is we get the most powerful person's opinion first. So we synthesize, then we pretend to diverge, but everyone's already been influenced. So when you talk about your data architecture, your data model, your data structure, that is the synthesis of the process. That is the deliverable of the synthesis of the design process. So if you start there, you're at best diverging from the synthesis to synthesize. And what I want to emphasize is while what we just said sounds really complicated, and it is, it doesn't mean it takes a long time. I would make a very strong argument that it's actually a higher velocity approach. You'll actually get to your outcome far faster.
Yep.
In a future episode, we should probably get a little bit more into the tactics of what we do to build out that architecture. But I really feel like if we didn't, like, would you agree with me that if the companies that we worked with understood what we talked about here, everything else would be 10 times easier? Would work 100%. 10 times better?
Because I mean, we do have some where there are people there who get it, and it is much easier to get that buy-in, to get that understanding of what we're trying to do and what the end game is. I mean, so really two key takeaways. It's all about the business motions. By the way, you said we talk about business process. I find myself saying motions far more these days than talking about process, because I think it's a better descriptor of what we're actually referring to, or what I'm referring to.
That's because you get to talk to them as we're onboarding and after we onboarded them.
Correct. And then really, what are the, who are the players? What are the roles? As we're starting to map things out.
And what you have to understand with players here is it's the concept of players. It's
right.
not the physical
people.
person or like this company could be 4 different things. Are you adequately accounting for that in the various situations that you have?
Yep. I'll look forward to a future episode where we talk about the tactics.
Until then, Jess.
Yeah. Until next time. Thanks, everybody.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the RevOps Show. If you are still listening, thank you from the bottom of my heart and our hearts for watching and listening and interacting with us and just letting us do this every week and have so much fun bringing you new episodes every week. It really has been such a fun journey, and we're not looking to stop anytime soon. So, exactly. With that in mind, one piece that Doug mentioned during this episode that I want to share that stuck out with me is that fewer is better and simpler is more. Operate at the extreme and work to bring it inward. I feel like that could go for not only data structure, but a lot of things in the business world. So keep that in mind. If you did enjoy this episode, please make sure to go subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to us. Leave us a review and share the episode. It would mean a lot to us. We love hearing what you have to say about the show. And if you have any questions you would like to ask Doug or Jess about your data structure or data architecture or anything related to RevOps, email me at hannah@liftenablement.com or hit us up on Twitter @demandcreator. Until next time, remember, you can't solve your upstream problems downstream.